Music is not everything, said George Strait, a legendary figure in the world of country music. The successful country musician was on the point of giving up his music career in order to devote his attention to his wife, Norma Strait. Norma has been an integral part of George's professional life and is frequently the silent force that brings him calm and reason throughout his work. She is someone who has never failed to support him, and she even made an appearance in the music video for his song Codigo. But now George needs to be there for Norma because the reverberations of a loss that they both experienced weigh heavily on Norma's heart. It was during George Strait's time in high school that he first met his future wife, although they had not yet begun a conversation. Only in passing did they come into contact with one another. It's possible that George was hesitating because he was too busy right now to make a commitment. It was his father, John Byron Strait Sr., who taught mathematics to junior high school students and also had a cattle ranch that was 2,000 acres in size and was located outside of Big Wells, Texas. On the other hand, George's weekends were typically spent working on the cattle ranch. The ranch was George's place of employment throughout the summer, and he took pleasure in his work there. One day, however, he made the decision to ask Norma out on a date. George thought that she was lovely, and he even went so far as to say that she was hot. In spite of this, he did not see her again for a considerable amount of time following that one date. It was the routines of life that had caused George to get preoccupied. On the other hand, was there another reason for him to not commit to Norma getting married? It was when he was in the 4th grade that his parents divorced, which ultimately resulted in the dissolution of his family. At the same time as he and his brother John Buddy Jr. remained with their father, his sister Pensy moved in with his mother. Despite the fact that he and his brother Buddy, as well as his father, continued to work on the farm, George had the impression that something was lacking in his life. Even though he did not see Norma again, his thoughts continued to be focused on her. As a result, he went back to her, and the two of them started dating while they were both students at Pearsall High School, which they both attended. While we are on the subject of high school, George was interested in more than just romantic encounters. There was something more that caught George's attention. Despite the fact that he enjoyed working on the ranch and living the life of a cowboy roper equally. Since George had a passion for music, he aspired to be a musician. Despite the fact that he is presently regarded as a legendary figure in the country music industry. The first type of music that George ever played was rock roll. During the time of the British invasion, George, like many other young Americans of the period, got swept up in the rock frenzy that was going on. When he was a student at Pearsall High School, he became a member of a band called the Stoics. The Stoics derived the most of their inspiration from the performances of the Beatles and other British musicians. In spite of the fact that rock during the time of the British invasion attracted a significant number of fans, George's decision to go with that genre was intriguing when one considers the prominence of country music in Texas. It was impossible to find him in the country music scene. It was so important to him that he chose not to listen to it on the radio and instead listened to the farmer's account. He followed the opportunities that rock and roll music presented him with and performed for a number of different bands. However, something came about. George was finally able to listen to country music by watching a live performance of the band, and as a result of their performance, he then went on to watch other live performances of country music. Therefore, his tastes in music shifted. He became enthusiastic about country music and started listening to artists such as Frank Sinatra, Hank Thompson, Lefty Frizzle, and others on a regular basis. Hank Williams, Merle Haggard, George Jones, and Bob Wills are the artists named. Finally, with the genre of music in hand, George appeared to be on the path to a life as a professional musician, yet he did not yet possess everything that he needed. After the initial on-and-off romance that George had with Norma, he was ready to take things to the next level. What he did next may be considered romantic, or it could be considered plain crazy, or it could be a little bit of both. Following the completion of their high school education, he and Norma went on an elopement to Mexico, where they eventually tied the knot on December 4th, 1971. The odds were stacked against them, and George was thrilled by the prospect. Immediately following the couple's wedding, George and Norma went back to Pearsall to have their wedding ceremony in a church. Their coupling was something that appeared to be taken directly from a romance novel nevertheless. The tragedy that befell them afterward was something that even the most heartless author would not be glad to write about. It was inevitable that Norma and George would suffer a loss that would break them, but at that time they were content with their tranquil existence. It wasn't just his wife that George was passionate about. Cowboy roping and country music sprang to mind. Because he had such a deep affection for the United States of America, he did not hesitate to serve in the military in 1971. He was ready to serve his country and do all he could for Americans. After becoming an infantryman, Strait was assigned to Schofield Barracks, which is located in Hawaii. As soon as he was assigned to Hawaii, Norma moved in with him, and the two of them started living together as a couple. They finally became a family on October 6, 1972, when his wife gave birth to their daughter, Jennifer. This marked the beginning of their family. Right now, George had everything that he had ever desired. He did not cure everything, but he did fix that fairly quickly. George never lost his enthusiasm for music, and whenever he was given the chance to perform, he made the most of it by giving it his full attention through the entirety of the night. After submitting an audition, he was accepted into Rambling Country, a country music band that was funded by the Army. Not only did the band play off the bass, but they also played on it. George and Norma had a happy and successful life. Nothing could have adequately prepared them for the impending calamity. After serving as a corporal in the military, George resigned in 1975 and immediately enrolled at Texas State University to pursue a degree in agriculture. It wasn't an unexpected option, given that he had spent his entire life working on a ranch nonetheless. I was curious as to why he didn't go into the music industry instead. He never left music alone, despite the fact that George did not study it. George was at Texas State University when he came upon a leaflet that had been distributed by the country band Stony Ridge throughout the university. They were looking for a new vocalist, and Strait joined them after instantly auditioning for the role. In fact, he altered the name of the band to the Ace in the Whole Band, which elevated him to a prominent position inside the band. Most of the band's performances took place at bars and honky-tonks statewide in Texas. In a short amount of time, they started to gain popularity in the area, and they eventually became opening acts for national bands like the Texas Playboys and Asleep at the Wheel. With the band's growing popularity in the region, the independent record label D Record, which had its headquarters in Houston, presented them with the opportunity to record singles. They were presented with a wonderful chance. In addition, Strait was the songwriter of the songs nonetheless. The songs were not successful. Norma continued to encourage Strait, despite the fact that he was becoming increasingly frustrated. Over the course of the day, Strait continued to work on the cattle ranch that his father owned in order to provide the necessary financial support for his family. George's contacts to the music industry were severed as a result of the failure of the tracks that they had successfully recorded with D Record. In spite of this, he and his band continued to perform with an unbelievable amount of enthusiasm. R.V. Woolsey, with whom George became acquainted, was the person they met as a result of their passion. One of the bars that George's band played at was managed by Woolsey, who was also the player. MCA Records, a major record label, was Woolsey's previous employer. In order to learn more about George and his band, Woolsey started talking to the people he knew. These individuals came, and while they professed their admiration for George and his band, they were not confident that his musical approach would be appealing to a wider audience. What exactly was it about this style that made him not accept it? Maintain your attention to find out. Even though George was feeling defeated, he knew that this was not the time for him to give up. After picking himself up, he started making more of an effort. George went to Nashville in the hopes of achieving success, but he was unsuccessful in his endeavors there. Every single studio that he tried to work with turned him down, and he went from one studio to the next. The setbacks gradually eroded his self-assurance, and before long, George had reached his breaking point. In order to provide for his wife and children, he needed to work. In addition, if music were not the path he would choose, he would pursue anything else. George was offered the opportunity to construct cow cages for a ranch in the midst of the setbacks that he experienced in his career as a musician. In spite of the fact that it was a task he had done before, he was not looking forward to doing it. George informed the band that he was going to leave, and with that, he also announced that his hopes of being a famous musician were going to be extinguished. No, Norma was not content. She was aware that her husband did not have a strong interest in the production of cattle pens, and she did not wish to be the cause that he would give up his musical career. In order to have a heart-to-heart conversation with him, she called him and asked him to give music another year of serious consideration. The last thing George wanted was to hurt Norma's feelings. He liked her too much to act in such a manner toward her. Therefore, he consented to make music for an additional year. George was able to secure a recording contract with MCA in 1981 as a result of his listening to Norma, which ended up being a stroke of good luck for him. Nevertheless, there was a catch to it. There was just one opportunity for George to interact with them. It is possible that they might consider releasing an album if his single was successful. That one opportunity was exactly what George required, while bringing his band along with him as a backup outfit. George's debut single for MCA Records was titled Unwound, and it was released. Additionally, it was a huge success. When it was ranked on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, the song reached number 6. In addition, that was sufficient for an album. George published his debut record, which was titled Straight Country, and as a result, he quickly became the most popular new performer in the neighborhood. His sound was seen as invigorating since it represented a departure from the pop-influenced country music that was reigning supreme in the music business at the time. It was widely believed that George's voice represented the new traditional country style. In addition to being commended for bringing country music back to its roots, the sound was praised for its ability to complement his genuine cowboy image. As a result of that album, George established himself as one of the most prominent stars in the industry. However, even the most prominent stars began to lose their shine. There were a number of positive events that occurred in 1981 for George, not the least of which was the triumph of his debut album and single. The birth of their second child, a son named George Bubba Strait Jr., was similarly brought about by his wife, Norma Strait. George achieved even greater success in 1982, when he released the song Fool-Hearted Memory, which became his first record to reach number 1 in the charts. Moreover, he was just beginning his journey. In the year 1982, one of his other compositions, titled Amarillo by Morning, was one of the top 5 Western ballads. He was able to merge all of his interests into a single endeavor by the year 1983. Is that what we mean? When the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo was held, the famed country artist Eddie Rabbitt would typically be the headlining act. On the other hand, he became unwell in 1983, and George had to stand in for him. This was yet another step forward in George's professional career, and it appeared that everything he touched turned out to be brilliant. Furthermore, between the years 1983 and 1984, he had a string of 5 projects that all reached the top spot on the Billboard chart. In spite of the fact that George was considering leaving the music industry around the year 1981, he ended up winning the Country Music Award for Top Male Vocalist, and his albums continued to stay at the top of the charts. While he was experiencing success in his career, his wife continued to be a reliable source of stability at home. As a result of the fact that her husband was going to be absent for the majority of the time, Norma made the decision to forego pursuing a job in order to ensure that she was always present with her children. She was protective of her children and a loving wife to her husband. She was a supporting wife to her husband. Because she was attentive to the requirements of her family, they were able to flourish as a result of her efforts. Even further, Strait was awarded the Country Music Award for Top Male Vocalist for the second time. Despite the fact that it was a tremendous victory for him, he was willing to give it up if it meant he could undo the catastrophe that had broken both him and his wife. Norma made every effort to monitor her children and did so to the best of her ability. As Jessica, her first kid, grew up and became 13, she became an adult. She had a large number of pals. Norma and her husband made an effort to keep track of her pals, and they had a favorable opinion of the people she was involved with. It was 1986, and she wanted to go out, but her parents didn't see any reason why she couldn't go. The permission to go out with her companions was granted to her. They felt that it was important for their daughter to have a sense of independence when she was 13 years old. Regrettably, that evening in 1986 would prove to be the final occasion on which they would be able to sight their daughter alive. The front seat of the car that she was in when she went out was the one in which she was riding, and she was not wearing her seatbelt at the time. As the driver, Gregory Wilson Allen, approached a bend, he was traveling at an excessively high speed. Due to the fact that he was driving too fast, he was unable to make the bend correctly. Jennifer was partially thrown out of the car when the automobile fell on her side, crushing her and ending her life on the spot. This occurred because she was not wearing her seatbelt at the time of the accident, which caused the car to flip sideways. A class of misdemeanor charge for vehicular homicide was brought against the driver of the vehicle. However, the act has already been completed. There was no chance that Jennifer would return. The significance of paying attention to and adhering to traffic regulations was brought to light by her incident. The fragile side of George and his wife was also revealed by the incident that she experienced. Neither one of them was able to recover from their injuries. Norma's heart was especially broken, and George felt compelled to make a proclamation about the situation. His decision was to end his participation in interviews. He avoided any and all types of public discourse that may put him in a position where he would have to discuss the effects that the death of his daughter had on him and Norma. Norma had the impression that she had failed to fulfill her responsibilities, and she was looking for a method to cope with the loss she had suffered. The Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation was established by Norma and George Strait in the year 1986. Norma's aim was that by establishing the foundation, she would be able to restore some kind of normalcy and protect other children from experiencing the same terrible fate as Jennifer. Norma took her job as co-founder of the foundation very seriously, and the charity's primary objective was to provide for children who lacked resources. It was imperative that she was present for her son, Bubba, who was only approximately 5 years old at the time of her daughter's passing. Despite the fact that the loss of her daughter occurred, The care that she provided for her son persisted even as George continued his performance. When it came to his responsibilities as a musician, he did not take a break. He was powerless to take a rest. He was shaken by the loss, and the only way he knew to prevent himself from falling into hopelessness was to sing. As the loss of his child continued to reverberate in his mind, George channeled his sorrow into his live performances and his musical compositions. He began his streak of 11 consecutive #1 hits in 1986 and continued it till 1989. His streak lasted until 1989. His numerous runs of #1 successes would eventually lead to him breaking the record held by the great Conway Twitties for the most #1 hits on the Hot Country Songs chart that is maintained by Billboard Entertainment. In addition to this, he would become the one who holds the record for the most #1 singles on all charts produced by an artist in any musical genre. As a result of the iconic musician's dominant run of number singles, he was nominated for both the Country Music Awards and the Academy of Country Music Awards. In terms of nominations for those two prizes, he would bring in the most. Subsequently, George was awarded the title of Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Awards in 1999 and 1990. He also won the American Country Music Award for Entertainer of the Year in 1990, and then he went on to win another Country Music Association Award in 2013, and then he earned another ACM Entertainer of the Year Award in 2014. Should he be successful in winning both of those awards, he would have won the most of any country performer up to this point in time. In the realm of country music, George is simply head and shoulders above his contemporaries. It was even his tours that became popular. In addition to being the first person to pioneer a new traditional country music style, he was also the first person to launch festival-type tours, which brought him enormous amounts of money. Getting money was not the only thing that George received. Additionally, he elevated his level of legendary status. At T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, was the location of his The Cowboy Rides Away tour. His performance in Texas in June 2014, which was attended by 104,793 people, was instrumental in establishing a new record for the largest indoor concert in the history of North America. He would eventually attract a much larger throng than this one, with approximately 110,905 people attending his concert in Kyle Field in College Station, Texas. In 2024, he established a new record for the largest concert booked for a single performer in the history of the United States. Looking forward to seeing him perform. Nevertheless, the crowd that he had to perform for at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo was nothing like the crowd that he had to perform for here. He played for more than 1 million fans at the rodeo, where he made more than 20 appearances. He was a significant character and musician for the rodeo.